All right, so with the U.S. election results showing a strong win for Donald Trump, there are significant implications for the global trade and international relations. One region that could experience profound changes under his leadership is Africa, including Nigeria. Well, the continent's largest economy at this point. Well, joining us is Mr. Yomi Fawemi, is an organizational development professional, joining me from Canada. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. But during Donald Trump's first term, he focused heavily on America first, often questioning the value of, multilateral trade agreements. How do you think this policy, will affect trade relations between the U.S. and Nigeria, Africa, as his, strongly, returning to office at this point?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, great question, and what everybody should be talking about, wherever you are in the world. I mean, one of the things is very clear. There are two clear things he has always said. He has said is American first policy, which means he would prioritize America above any other place, which looks like what any leader would do. But considering his antecedent, that will have a lot of implication. But much more the fact that he has said that he's going to impose tariff, and at his various campaigns. Of course, if you notice, it's not as if we have a coherent policy that he released about tariffs. He has quoted various percentages on tariffs, and he did not mention whether it was going to be geographically different. So we don't know whether the tariff will be higher for China than from Nigeria, than from Angola, whatsoever. So we don't know what the tariff regime is, but what he had said was that he was going to impose tariffs. And the implication for a country like Nigeria, and for us, in Africa, we're, I think, the second or third highest trading partner with the US. It becomes a big challenge if he really decides to impose tariffs, because what that means is that any product leaving any country going to the US is going to become likely less competitive, particularly if it can produce an alternative. The first time he was president, he introduced tariffs on steel, and that affected, for example, the steel industry in a place like Canada, for example, where steel production suddenly was no more competitive, producing in Canada and taken to the US. So if he goes ahead with a tariff structure that is negative, that is high to Nigeria or any other country, then that could be a big challenge. There's also the question of whether it comes with a trade policy that makes it difficult to have products get into Canada as quickly as, to the US as quickly as they should. Because don't forget that the last time he came, he had tariffs on countries, he had tariffs on products. So we need to also be conscious of that, because the assumption is that the tariff is only going to be on countries, but he had tariffs on countries, he had tariffs on products. Remember the classical arguments, and what many of the economics use as example was, for example, tariffs on washing machine to do laundry. Now, he introduced a tariff around that, and that led to an increase in the cost of tariff in the cost of washing machine in the US. And what was very interesting in that case was that it was a target against the Chinese market. And his assumption, what he argued then, was that the tariffs on washing machine would make American producers produce more washing machine that would be affordable for Americans. But what happened was that the tariffs he introduced on washing machines made imported washing machine expensive, but also the washing machine producers in the US also didn't necessarily produce more, but they also increased their prices. So the price of washing machine went up in the US, whether it was imported or not. So we do not know whether the tariffs will be on nations or on products. What will we do?
Yeah, definitely. He's the king of tariffs. At this point, he keeps talking about all of those tariffs. But in Nigeria, we keep talking about the Jacka Trend. So, talk to me now. What does this win mean for the Jacka Trend we see, or does it translate to Jackpada at some point?
Again, another of those things. I mean, one of the biggest arguments people had against Kamala Harris, the person that they ran against, was that she was not declaring the policy. Again, there is really no policy document that Donald Trump has produced that tells us exactly what is going to happen to immigration. But again, history helps us. You remember, Nigeria was one of the countries he placed a travel ban on. when he was president. So if that happens again, then that will influence travels between the US or not. Now, many people, I remember somebody was arguing yesterday and saying, no, he wouldn't do anything against Nigeria. And I was like, yeah, but this was what happened in his first term. And the person was saying, and I said, wait, let me ask you, how old were you when it was his first term? Because a number of people were not either old enough or were not exposed to some of those challenges then, so they really don't relate with it, and that could have influenced some of the voting result that we saw from many states. Now, the first time he had introduced a travel plan, but it wasn't just a travel ban, because everybody talks a lot about the travel ban, which necessarily is going to affect immigration. But also at the same time, in the first time, there were changes in policy. So, for example, in Lagos, Nigeria, where we could do Dropbox, the system of doing application for visa, that changed. So if you wanted to go to the US, it was going to take a longer, more onerous processes, which was not the case before. Now, that is going to influence travels between both countries. If there are also issues around review of agreement, whether it's BASA, that talks about how many planes can leave US for Nigeria, how many planes that can leave Nigeria for US, that could be a challenge. But I think the big question is what he has said he will do on day one. Again, we don't have any figures. I've heard him talk about it during the campaign that he will deport on day one between 2 million. I've heard him mention 5 million. I've actually heard him mention 20 million. Now, if this deportation trend becomes real and he decides to deport people, now you know the huge Nigerian population we have in the US. Now, many of them are legally there. Many of them are even citizens, dual citizens to be precise. Many of them are holding high position in government. I mean, Wale Adeyemo, that is the highest ranking Nigerian official in the US, for example. Some of them are great entrepreneurs, doctors, nurses. But there is also a likelihood that we may also have quite a huge number of people that may have challenges as a result of the policy. So will he be deporting people? Is that likely going to happen? So all of that will influence Jacka or Jacka. There are new policies around that makes it difficult for a Nigerian trained doctor to practice in the US.
Right.
Because when we talk about tariffs, people don't also realize that foreign education can also become a tariff issue. And then you impose restriction on foreign trained professionals to come to work in your country. Like you have seen in Canada, that's why you see more doctors who will jackpot to the UK or jackpot to the US compared to Canada. What if he adopts a similar policy and our doctors can't just move over there? So again, we're still all in the dark to say
wait and
we don't
see
have any document what will happen.
I guess it's a wait and see at this point. But thank you so much. It was great having your perspective, Mr. Yomi, Family Organizational Development Professional. We'll definitely be looking out for what happens after he's sworn in.